if one person listened to this podcast,
Mm.
takes one thing from this today,
Mm.
it would be to learn that there is a way of going from being used by your mind to using your mind, I think.
Steve Ware, absolutely delighted to have you on the show, the Purpose-Led Leadership Podcast. We've been, I'd say, mates on LinkedIn. We met at Leah's party a couple of times. We've built up a really good relationship.
Yeah.
I love you as a person, love you as a man, love what you're doing on LinkedIn. But for those who don't know you, what do you actually do now?
That's a great question. Do you know, on the train on the way up, I was thinking, you might start up by asking me that. I've answered this differently as time goes on. And I'll probably answer it now by saying, you know, those days when you wake up and you feel like, I've got this, you're rested, you sleep well, feeling good. I think I'd teach people to have more days like that and less crappy days. I used to say things like, I'm the world's least likely mindfulness teacher. You know, I help people not to burn out. I help people to feel less anxious. But ultimately, it's feeling your best and performing your best, I think. And that's something I lost and I was desperate to get back.
Yeah, because there's a lot of this stuff out there, isn't there, about daily routines, and I don't think it can ever be a one size fits all.
No.
But let's talk about how you got into that later on. I want to delve into some of the techniques that you use, and a lot of it is meditation focused, isn't it? And we have conversations on LinkedIn about Eckhart Tolle and being present and all that kind of stuff. I'm always fascinated as to how people get to where they've got to. They don't just fall into these things. So let's go back. Let's go back in terms of your journey then, kind of since school. Paint us a little bit of a picture around what's happened to you, including the highs and lows, some dark times, and just give us a feel for you as a human being.
So I grew up, I'm not somebody with a massive trauma story like you. I mean, I know, I'm sure the listeners know your story. There's some incredible stuff in that, which we may touch on, may not.
Yeah, right.
I don't have a dramatic trauma story, but if looking back, I was always an anxious kid and I was a very high performing kid. And I think it kind of set me up for a fail because I never failed at anything, Chris.
Yeah.
I was great at school. I got an assisted place in the local private school because my parents couldn't afford to send me there, but I managed to get an assisted place. I passed the exams. I did well there. I got taken on by IBM when I was 18. I got a first class degree, all this kind of stuff. And anything I seemed to do as a youngster turned to gold. You know, if I went down the pub and we started playing pool, I'd normally win. I was pretty good at most sports I did. I danced when I was a kid. Mum and dad sent me dancing when I was 3 years old. That's something not a lot of people know.
Right.
And I did some professional stuff when I was a youngster up in London with Sylvia Young and stuff.
Right.
So I was surrounded by success and I was surrounded by gold medals and, you know, trips to Japan as an 11-year-old to go and dance at all this kind of stuff. And I never ever failed. So I didn't know what failure felt like. And looking back, I think I kind of established this place where underneath it all, I was pretty insecure and pretty anxious. But externally, I felt like I had to wear this mask of, I've got this, I'm going to win this. Nothing's ever a problem for me. Come to me for advice. And I noticed that in my friends and I noticed that kind of everywhere I went. And then my first probably fall from grace was I got glandular fever age 21.
Right.
And it floored me. Totally floored me. I couldn't finish my degree. I was really, really unwell with it. And that sort of burned me out mentally as well.
Right.
So I ended up finishing my degree. So the story is I finished my degree. They, based on everything I'd done thus far, although I didn't sit some of my finals, they gave me a first. And then I was going to go off and do this big project with IBM. To do that, I had to go abroad. So I went abroad when I was 21. And this was a massive radical change for me. It was learning a whole new technology and intensive boot camp.
Yeah.
I went out there and I'd probably say I burned out there.
Describe what burnout is, because my understanding of burnout and having experienced it 2 or 3 times, and to be completely truthful, I actually think I've got an element of it right now, which is interesting, which we can delve into. But for me, it's a chronic kind of physical and emotional exhaustion, almost a bit of a helplessness, a bit of overwhelm.
Yeah.
What's your understanding of it?
Yeah. It's a very personal thing, isn't it, sometimes? I would describe it for me, I've experienced it as radical sleeplessness and high anxiety are the 2 main things.
Right.
So an inability to sleep and this constant fear of, you can hardly catch your breath. even when you're not doing anything, even when you're, I remember
yeah.
going to the doctors when I felt burned out when I was 21 and I was really anxious, and he said, "What about?" And I was like, "Nothing. I don't know. I haven't got anything. I can't pin on anything." And that made it feel even worse.
Yeah.
Because if you go there and go, "Oh, I'm worried about this exam, I'm worried about this, or someone's died or what," then they go, "Okay, we'll take this tablet for this, we'll go and do it."
Yeah.
And sitting there going, "I just feel really anxious and I don't know why," made me feel even worse. Like I don't even got an excuse anymore. But to answer your question, burnout for me feels like everything's hard work.
Yeah.
Sometimes just getting up and doing something. You're not yourself. You're snapping at people, you're short-tempered and you're losing sleep and you're anxious. You kind of go down this exhaustion funnel, don't you?
And you're quite cynical about everyone and everything, I think, as well.
You think people are against you when they're not.
And it leads into depression.
Yeah.
And I think people kind of shy away from talking about this. And I think that I've seen posts about the way to be happy is to just feel happy and you'll become a magnet. I think when you're in this kind of place of burnout and depression or whatever it is, you can't just, okay, I'm going to be happy. It just doesn't work like that, does it?
No. You can't. I never rubbish any of these things. I never rubbish positive thinking. I never rubbish gratitude and journaling, all this kind of stuff. They've all got their place.
Of course.
But I think in and of themselves, if you pick one out in isolation and just say, you know, you're responsible for the thoughts that come into your head. And I hate when I see this toxic positivity on.
Yeah.
You know, people will say, "Oh, well, you're kind of responsible for your thoughts, so just think happy thoughts." I mean, if that was true, there'd be nobody anywhere taking antidepressants. Everyone would snap out of it immediately, right?
I'm going to say the answer is, there's not one definitive answer, but I think that speaking to one of my coaches this morning, she reminded me that often it's about, we've had the discussion before, it's about acceptance. And the more you try to fight it or force it to go the other way, the worse it gets. And I think the ability to, I think what has happened to me is like, I'm quite a dynamic, proactive person, always want to be on the go, always want to be doing something. Like, even on social media, scrolling all the time, or the next meeting. And I think the ability to actually stop and actually do nothing, not even think, is very difficult for a lot of people.
Very difficult.
And I look at some people, and I run businesses and I talk about being proactive and doing loads of work all the time. But I think that I look at some people and I think, you must be heading for a fall soon, because you cannot operate at 24/7 that power all the time. So what I'm trying to say there is that in this day and age, I think it's really difficult to get that balance right, but also to learn that, put your phone down, don't even put the TV on, just fucking sit there and feel.
Yeah, but that's the hardest thing in the world to do, right? How much courage does it take to sit and be with your thoughts when your thoughts are tormenting you? How much courage does it stop and put your phone down and avoid distraction when every fiber of your being is saying, please fucking distract me from my mind because my mind's killing me right now? It takes huge courage to do that. And I ran away from that for years. Years. And only when I suffered to a point where I thought, I can't keep running. I'm exhausted from running now.
So talk to us about that. You mentioned the burnout thing, and so talk to us about how you did get out of it and how it did affect you a little bit as well.
Yeah. So I ignored it. I ignored it at 21 and tried all the normal, in quotes, coping methods, you know, just working harder, just burying my head in the sand, just partying, just drinking. I never tried drugs, but I tried every other way of kind of just, and I almost think of it as, you know, you're trying to run from this thing, but it's forever behind you. It's almost like it's attached to you by a piece of bungee cord, right? And the harder you run, it's just going to snap. It's just going to keep coming.
Yeah,
and so
of course.
Eventually, it was me. It was really late 30s when I eventually got to a point where I thought, I need something else. I've got to find something else. I didn't know what it was, though. I had no idea what it was. We're not taught any of this stuff at school. We're taught to go to the doctors, and the doctor will give you something to take, and that makes it okay. But I was very curious as to, was there something else?
Do you feel you're still searching? What I mean by that is that I've personally done a hell of a lot of work on myself, and I've helped coach and mentored many other people because of my experiences.
Yeah.
But I think, A, you're never out of the woods, and B, sometimes these things can creep up on you unexpectedly. With you personally, what torments you? What kind of does affect you in that regard? For me, it's when people are disingenuous and they kind of do people over, or that kind of stuff really affects me. I don't know why. It shouldn't. I've built massive businesses. I've been very ruthless. I've fired people. I've done loads of quite hardcore stuff.
Yeah.
But deep down, sometimes things affect me and they shouldn't. But that's just maybe because I'm a human being. What about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, lots of things affect me. I think the biggest tormentor in my life is definitely my mind and what it's capable of saying to me.
Mm.
And if I've learned one thing in life, it's that the thoughts that run through your mind aren't facts.
Yes.
Even the ones that say they are.
Mm-hmm.
Even the ones that are screaming that they are at 3 o'clock in the morning, you can't get rid of them.
Yeah.
And if one person listened to this podcast, takes one thing from this today, it would be to learn that there is a way of going from being used by your mind to using your mind, I think. There is a way back from that. When your mind is your total master and you can't see a way out and it's torturing you, there are ways that you can work to not flip that immediately, but to work with it.
Well, it's trying to separate yourself from your actual mind and your thoughts. And that statement, I think we both said it quite a few times, we are not our thoughts. And people will say, well, how can that be? My thoughts are my actual thoughts. But the science behind that is that we're indoctrinated, or we're flooded with so much information and stuff. But you describe why you think they're not our thoughts and how we can avoid thinking that everything we think is true. But some of it's got to be true, right?
Some of it does, of course. But if we were our thoughts, I mean, every thought you've had up to now has come and gone, right?
I hope so.
Yeah. Every emotion you've had has come and gone up to now. So fundamentally what we are, we're probably going to go quite deep in this podcast.
Let's do it.
Fundamentally what we are has to be beyond that. If we're something that experiences something that comes and goes, then we can't be that thing that comes and goes. And thought falls into that realm for me. But what most people don't realize is that you can learn fairly quickly, but it then takes a lot of practice, continual practice, probably for the rest of your life. You can learn to observe your thoughts. You can learn to be the watcher of those thoughts. And when you become the awareness that's above your thoughts, you've actually opened up a different dimension there, because that awareness of your thinking is not another thought. That's crucial. That's not another thought.
No.
And so, people sometimes like to picture this. When I'm teaching people meditation, I will say, imagine you're this beautiful blue sky. And you're kind of sitting there, it's a beautiful blue sky, and then a cloud comes along, and it may be a huge, horrible, dark rain cloud that doesn't shift for a long time, or maybe a little nice, fluffy, bubbly cloud. Those are the thoughts, right? And ultimately, they will come and they will go. Now, we chase the good ones, and we try and fight the bad ones. Clinging to either is a kind of fruitless task. But I mean, for anybody, let's make it really simple, Chris. For anybody that thinks that they control their thoughts completely, or they are their thoughts, I mean, I'd say to someone, of course we can. I'd liken it to breathing, right? We're both breathing, hopefully, and we can take control of our breath. If I said take some really deep breaths, you could do that. You can make your breath deeper, more shallow, whatever, right? Same thing, but ultimately, you're breathing is a function of your body, of your intelligent body, right? You're not beating your heart. You're not breathing. You're not digesting your food. You're not healing your body when it's cut. All these kind of things, right? They're happening to you, so to speak. I think implies a volition that's not there. We're being thought. I would say we're not thinking most of the time. So let's flesh that out a little bit more. So I would say, tell me what you had for dinner last night. Obviously, you can direct to a thought and go to the past and collect that memory in it. And we can project ourselves into the future. What you're doing tomorrow, what you can do next year. We can plan the future, right? So we can direct our thinking. But if I said, sit here now, Chris, and close your eyes and be still and just allow your mind to think for a second. And let's see what comes up. You probably wouldn't be able to tell me. Any old random shit could come up. From when you were a kid, last week, last year. So ultimately, when we're not trying to push our mind in a certain direction and take control of it, what normally happens for most people is conditioned, repetitive thoughts continually go through their head. Or they're labeling, they're thinking about the environment they're in. Depending on their age, a young person will probably be very future-centered, so they'll have a lot of thoughts about the future. If we're in our people's home now, there'll be a lot of thoughts about the past.
So how do you avoid the negative thinking in terms of, what I've done is, we can separate ourselves and we can probably move to feelings, but I think it's things like affirmations, meditation. We can talk and think ourselves into most things, right? But I think if you are going to think thoughts, surely it's best to have positive thoughts about yourself, right?
But I would start. Let's unpack that then. So how do you stop the negative thoughts? I'd say you don't, to start with. And I put a post out recently about this, and I said that how can some people go through the worst atrocities in life
Yep.
and come out and lead fulfilling, happy lives? And how can some people have exactly the same experience and just be depressed and stuff? And the answer, one of the answers to that, is that they learn somehow to accept what has happened and what is happening. And if you can accept, if a negative thought comes up, if your first reaction to that is, Jesus, God, I thought I was better than this. I thought I'd done so much work on myself. Why is this coming back? I bet no one else struggles like. If you're just fighting, you're flaming that fire. So, but if your first reaction is a little bit more compassion to say, shit happens. I'm suffering right now. It happens to everybody. Everybody has to learn to live with fear. There's a really nice line in a poem that I love.
Of course.
And so if your first reaction to that anxiety, wherever it came from, is to say, I see you. Doesn't mean I like you. Doesn't mean I don't want you to go immediately. Doesn't mean that, but what it means is here right now and I accept that. That's all. It's like me looking outside saying, is it raining? Okay. It's either raining or it's not.
What do you think it's teaching you?
See, that requires awareness, I think. So sometimes we know where the fear comes from. If we're talking anxiety, sometimes we don't.
No.
And I think for me, a lot of it was buried stuff. You and I talk a lot about Eckhart Tolle. Anyone that's familiar with Eckhart Tolle's work, he's got this, he describes this thing called pain body. Pain body for him, in one simple definition of it, is everything that you've buried in your entire life, all the negative stuff that you didn't deal with or didn't quite deal with. That stuff doesn't just disappear, right?
No, it goes
to the basement and it probably goes to the basement and lifts weights and comes back stronger.
On that point though, because as you well know, and the audience will know, that I'm very vocal and open and comfortable with telling my story about my vulnerabilities and my anxiety that happened and my trauma. But what I'm also very conscious is that I think that it's important to go back. You have to resolve or try to resolve those issues, get to the root cause and process it. But is there not a fine line between becoming your story and not being able to move on to new chapters because you feel that you are your story? So for me, I think that we have to have counselling or therapy or coaching or whatever, or talk it through, whatever it is you need to do. But at what point do you stop that, or don't you stop that?
I guess that comes down to personal decision. I mean, one thing I would say is even though I teach mindfulness, I don't say it's the be all and end all tool. It's a tool. It's a very powerful tool in a box of tools. And, I've got plenty of time for talking therapies and coaching and, all these kind of things. So I think they can complement each other. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. And I don't think there's one silver bullet here that.
So that mask that you talked about, and that resonates with me as well, because when I was running my multi-million-pound business, I put my suit on and I became this different person, right? This very sort of measured, ruthless, professional, with yourself. Can I say, I think you come across very measured. I think you come across as composed. But I think that there must be times when you're not that.
Loads of times.
Way. So
loads of times.
Did you feel that this might, in a non-offensive way, but do you feel that sometimes you're still wearing that mask, or you have to in the work that you do?
Yeah. Because I can remember going to, so I used to talk about this in IBM. I used to talk about mindfulness in IBM, right? And there's this funny story looking back where I got this email saying, can you come and talk about mindfulness? And I used to get a lot of them, and I used to go, quite often it'd be a few people in a room, we just chat, be a few people. What I didn't realize on this one, it was the head of HR for UK and Ireland. Someone on behalf of her had sent me this invitation. So I turned up at this building called IBM Hursley, which is a beautiful big building and sort of wooden panel walls, auditorium. And I went there and I suddenly realized, I thought, shit, I'm actually speaking to a lot of people here today.
Right.
And my heart started banging out of my chest.
Yeah.
And came with that was immediately the thought, hang on, aren't you meant to be the guy that's chilled out all the time?
Yeah.
You can't be the guy who's, they were literally pinning a mic on me here. And I was almost saying to the guy, can we put it higher? Because they're literally going to hear my chest banging out my chest here.
No way.
And and how does that look when the guy stands up on stage who's meant to be Mr. Cool, meant to be Mr. Chilled, and he's crapping himself because he's not a natural public speaker. He doesn't seek the limelight, but he's there because he's so passionate. He really wants to help people.
Yeah.
And I think the answer is in vulnerability and authenticity. And I would probably, back then I didn't. I kind of hid it more. And I performed. I'm like the classic duck on water, right? It's very calm.
Yeah.
But nowadays, I've been much more happy, I think, with saying, I'm really nervous to be standing up in front and speaking to you now.
You're happy saying that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I was quite nervous about coming today.
Yeah. I'd worry if you wasn't, to be honest with you. Yeah. Why I say that is because I feel that, look, I'm not advocating people not to be nervous, but I think being in tune and in touch with your feelings is really, really important.
Yeah.
But maybe we are too, when people say, "Oh, I'm an empath," maybe we're too nice. Maybe we're too in tune with our feelings. Because I get that quite a lot, where people kind of dismiss some of the stuff that I'm saying. But I wouldn't swap who I am for. I think there's an art between showing your emotions, understanding your feelings, but also not allowing everything to affect you. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a time and a place,
Mm.
and there's a place to be vulnerable, and there's a way to be vulnerable. And vulnerability is a strength, I think, if it's done well. That can probably tip into people sensing fear, and if you're leading them starting to be worried if maybe you're too vulnerable at the wrong moment. But I mean, that's a really interesting question. I'm a dog lover as well, and there's a great quote that rings in my head from a great teacher in the US called Cesar Millan, and he says, humans are the only people that will follow an unstable leader.
Right.
And
why
is that? Yeah. So dogs won't follow an unstable pack leader, no matter what. Right. No matter what you
dogs
try and
won't
do,
follow an
they
unstable.
won't. Animals won't.
No.
So they won't follow an unstable. If they think that energy is unstable, they won't. Instinctively, they just can't follow it. Humans can be bribed, and mainly through fear. Actually,
yeah.
If people are scared, they'll follow you. They don't particularly trust you, and they certainly don't see you as a sort of calm, assertive leader. But they're terrified, and they don't really know what else to do.
It's interesting, though, isn't it? Because the whole Dele Alli interview, I'm sure you saw that.
Did you?
I mean, he showed real courage and vulnerability there, and that's a different kind of vulnerability, different kind of leadership. That's authentic, kind of like, for me, that is strength. That is not necessarily unstable. That's that. People would deem that as being unstable, but I don't think that's unstable.
I don't think it is. I was at a LinkedIn networking event when you posted about that, and I sat in a cafe in London and I listened to all of it.
Yeah,
and then I went to this event and I was chatting to someone. I won't name them, and he was roasting Dele Alli.
Really?
I don't think he'd even seen the interview.
Wow. Okay.
And he was sort of saying, "It's bullshit." This is a way of him trying to come back. He had a dip in form. Let's blame this. Yeah. There's loads of people go through this. It's a bit pathetic. And I was like, well, you don't know that. And it was interesting for me to have a discussion with someone like that, because I think the old me would have got really angry about it and defended Dele Alli to the hilt. I was still a little bit angry about it, and I still defended him to the hilt, but I was a little bit more measured about it, because I just thought, I can't say anything, and no one can say anything to convince this person of anything else.
It's kind of like picking your battles, isn't it? And that's an interesting point you pick up, whereby in this world there are people that are going to be like that, but if we then go and get aggressive or confrontational with that person, then to me that proves that we've still got work to do. And I think LinkedIn is a good example, where I think you've been on a great journey with LinkedIn. Certainly the last 4 to 6 months, you've really elevated yourself, and well done, and that's really, really good. But I think we're both aware, and we both picked up on, the LinkedIn community is great. It's a great thing, but there's a lot of people out there that are, I think, posting for different reasons, and it's hard not to. Some people post just to have a go and dig other people out. And
why do you think they do that?
Well, I think they do that to try and get their own engagement up, and maybe out of their own fear and insecurities, and they probably see something in themselves in other people, and it's a deflection.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think so. I think it comes from a place of insecurity and fear, probably. You don't ever really see people that are doing well doing that kind of thing, do you?
No.
Or comfortable or having great days doing that.
No.
It's normally some cry for help on some level, I think.
So in terms of LinkedIn, I obviously it's a wonderful platform. What I'm finding lately is that there's a hell of a lot of influencers, and whether we put ourselves in that bracket or not, I don't necessarily care, but there's a lot of posts about how to write the best post. This is what you need to do. There seems to be a wash of that, which is great. But I think those posts are really helpful. But in terms of the different types of people on LinkedIn, different types of business owners that might be able to write a post, but does it really help them scale their actual business and their lives and that kind of stuff? And I think that it's really important that what I've learned is to step away a little bit from LinkedIn, look at my feed. What am I learning from my LinkedIn feed? What am I getting from it? When I post, what's the intention from it? So I'm taking a little bit of a break from LinkedIn at the moment, because I feel as if you can have too much of a good thing, right?
Yeah.
And I think if you're not constantly understanding why you're on there, I'm on there to build value, to build my business, to build a community, to make some friends as well. But I fell into the trap of kind of like posting just to get some validation. And I think we've all done that.
We've all done that.
And I think there was a post that someone else posted, I can't remember who it was. I think some people would, if they had the choice of likes and engagement versus money, they would choose likes and engagement.
Really?
I think they're so thirsty for it.
Yeah, such a big dopamine hit.
That it's kind of, I think you forget why you're on there in the first place, right?
Yeah. Do you know, I've had this exact thought recently, and it's very tempting, because it's almost not easy, but it's almost easier to get accidental engagement and likes. And I got one, I can't remember. First thing that, and I've never had posts go viral and go really big, but
yeah,
I posted something about every packet of crisps in the UK expires on a Saturday. It's like a nice thing to play with your mates at the pub, right? They read out the date. You say it's a Saturday.
Yeah.
And not everyone, but loads of people jumping on it, and they're like, I'm going to check the crisps in the cupboard. I'm going to, and my ego liked that, right? It's like,
of course.
If I give, top 10 tips about mindfulness or what's helped me most for my mental health, you get way less engagement.
Yeah.
If you put a testimonial on, you get way less engagement.
Yeah.
So there's this little sort of greedy monster that's sitting on that's saying, but don't post the really useful stuff, all the testimonials, or the stuff that's giving real value. Post something that's going to get loads of likes and loads of comments. And then you start going down the thought of, well, what is that? And then you start to dumb down. I start to dumb stuff down, or I'm tempted to, and then I've got to really reel myself in quickly. So I know what am I actually on LinkedIn for? I'm glad you answered that question, because sitting here, I see you as a very successful guy.
Thank you.
Why do you even need to be on LinkedIn? Do you need to be on LinkedIn? Could you not bin all your social media and just live your life and run your business?
I think that I'm leaning towards certainly spending less time on there, because I feel that in any event, focusing on one platform is a dangerous thing to do anyway, because you never know what's going to happen with it. So my advice would be, if you are on social media, don't put your eggs in one basket. But also, there's different ways to skin the cat, and obviously LinkedIn is a great way to build business and build money. But if I looked at my screen time, for example, over the last year, it would shock me, because in the amount of time that you can, I think if you're going to do it, I think it's about being tactical with it. Maybe have certain time. People are going to say, whatever, it's difficult to do that. But believe me, I think that you can go down a rabbit hole with it if you're not careful.
For sure. It's like anything in itself. It's neither good nor bad, right? It's like the internet. But how and does it control you, or do you control it? It's ultimately it, I suppose. Yeah,
but I mean, for me, it's about, I enjoy the community. I enjoy speaking to as many people on there as possible that I class as friends. But the way I built my business, my engagement has gone down quite a lot, but my clients and my actual ROI has gone through the roof. So I'm having conversations with my actual customers, as opposed to, with all due respect, you. I mean, actually, I might be a client of yours one day, actually. But do you know what I mean? It's, I think sometimes we can lose sight of that.
Totally. I mean, I'm finding my way on LinkedIn. I only started using it in anger really April maybe last year. So I'm kind of new to it. But I feel like it's a really helpful source of clients for me.
Yeah.
And it's very easy for it to dominate you, and for it to tip you one way or the other when you're feeling fragile.
Yeah.
I mean, you just said you're taking a break from it, right?
Yeah, I'm taking a break from it because I feel at the moment it's not healthy for me to be just constantly engaging with, as much as fun as it is, the time I'm spending engaging on stuff like crisps or or that kind of stuff is actually not going to do me any good in the long run. So I feel like I'm a bit of a killjoy, but I think what I'm trying to say is, I think it's important to have a bit of perspective around it. But also, I think that with yourself, what is your sort of plan moving forward around? Is it always going to be just you as a mindfulness or meditation coach, or have you got a grand plan?
Do you know what? I don't have a grand plan, and I've stopped feeling guilty for not having a grand plan. Because when I left, the finish from my story is kind of, I burned out IBM, found something that really helped me, which was mindfulness. Didn't expect it at all. Bought an 8-week course back into the company. It was really successful. Taught that for a bit, and then I lost my job in 2020. So I lost my job in the pandemic. And at that point, I thought, what am I going to do? I was 45, 46. And I thought, what am I going to do with the rest of my life now? How many more years am I going to work? And I'd stopped enjoying my work at IBM, if I was honest.
Yeah.
So I knew I didn't want to go back into another corporate doing IT stuff, even though that's what I knew. And so I thought, well, all I know at this point is the thing that lights me up, the thing that gets me out of bed, the thing that makes me passionate is teaching mindfulness. I love helping people. I will never get tired of people emailing me saying, Steve, I'm sleeping so much better. Steve, my resting heart rate's lower. Steve, my blood pressure's normal after 10 years, after a decade of hypertension. Big things. People say huge things.
Yeah.
And it genuinely doesn't fill me up as a massive ego. I did this, I gave them this. I'm so proud and humble to be a conduit and part of that journey.
Yeah.
That the hairs on the back of my neck stand up when I get it. That's what I love.
Purpose, right?
That's my purpose. That's what I love. If that takes me to financial, freedom and loads of money, brilliant. If it doesn't, I'm cool with it.
Isn't it funny? Because you talked about your childhood and you never failed. You had, good people around you and it was very successful. Do you feel that when you got burnt out at IBM and or when you lost your job in COVID, that actually was horrendous at the time, but without that, obviously where you are now, it's almost a gift in a way.
I describe that as a great gift in ugly wrapping paper.
Yeah.
And that's one of my favorite expressions. And I use it to people. You've got to be very careful when you use that to people, and especially people that are going through big traumatic things. If you ask them too early, do you see this as something that's helping you, or you if you ever dare use the word grateful. But looking back, I'm absolutely, I'll ask you that in a second, but looking back, I'm absolutely grateful IBM let me go, because I'm so risk averse. My dad, he was in insurance his whole life, right? So every day on his desk, this building's burned down, this car's been stolen, this disaster, that disaster, this is flooded. What does that do to you as a person? I had no understanding of that as a kid. I've only thought about it recently, but it made Dad very risk averse, and it made me inherit a real risk aversion. So I was clinging to the wreckage of IBM as long as I could. And then eventually they were like, no, you're gone.
Yeah.
And at that point I thought, well, okay, there's nothing I can do about that now. Onwards, I've got to make a decision. It took away what if you fail when you leave?
Yeah. Isn't it interesting how we're parented, how we're managed, how we're educated? We're kind of told to get the wife, get the dog, get the house, get the husband, wherever it, get the car, get the 9-to-5 job. And I think if you said to your parents, at the age of 20, I'm going to be a mindfulness coach, they'd probably kicked you out by the ears, wouldn't they? Well, it's kind of like interesting how conditioned we are. It's not their fault. They were conditioned by their parents.
Absolutely, of course they were.
So sometimes I think you can learn from how not to be parented, or how not to be taught and educated. So you haven't got kids, have you?
No.
But if you did, what advice would you give to the average, 14, 16, 18-year-old going into their life?
God, that's a tough question. I would say don't let anyone ever talk you out of your passion. Because I think if you've got real passion for something, and I discovered mine relatively late, it just helps you get through so many brick walls.
Yeah.
It just helps you ignore the naysayers. It just gives you this quiet, even if you're not a self-confident person, which I'm not particularly, it gives you this little fire that doesn't go out in your belly that says, yeah, but I love this and I feel pulled towards doing this. It almost feels like something else chooses you rather than you choose it, if that makes any sense. And if you can discover that at whatever age, and you may not discover it as a kid, you may need to go through a lot of life, and you may need to go down the well-trodden paths of get a job in the civil service and make sure make sure your pension's good and make sure that, and you buy the house and the car.
Yeah.
I think most people find their true vocation when they suffer in their lives, probably. That's certainly what really shaped me and what.
I agree with that. So I ban on about purpose, and I know how important you think it is, but I also talk about money quite a lot. I was born in a very poor family, born in a caravan, council house boy, all that kind of stuff. Self-made, not that I like to use that term. Lots of people supported me and helped me get there, but I made my millions on my own.
Yeah.
Lost it all, as you know, and then became very resentful for people who had money. Now I'm getting my money back and it's all really, really good. But that journey that I've been on, I personally think you need to have a relationship with money. What's your thoughts on money? Because it's really important, money, isn't it?
Very.
But is not the most important thing, is it?
No, I don't think it can be. I learned that probably the real time I learned that was when I burned out in my late 30s and thought, I can remember sitting there thinking, somebody said, why don't you try mindfulness? And I was like, I'm not trying that bullshit. It's like, I had so many visions of it just being, it's funny looking back. Most of my thoughts were around, it's just a waste of time. How can sitting quietly ever do anything? It's just wasting more time, right? And I didn't have enough time to do the stuff I want to do anyway. So I had loads of opinions of it, none of them grounded in anything other than ignorance. But I think once I tried it and it started to change my life, I was just much more open to anything. Remember that moment, somebody said, why don't you try mindfulness? And I was like, no. And then I went home and I thought, I'm not going to tell anyone, but I'm going to try it. Because it made me feel weak and vulnerable. So I downloaded this app. I downloaded the Headspace app. I can remember downloading it thinking, I've got about 20 grand in the bank in savings. I would give you that. If you were Mr. Headspace, if you represented what I wanted, which was more peace, less anxiety, to be able to sleep again. If you were sat here now, Chris, when I was 10 years ago, and said to me, I can give you those things, but I need everything you've got. I need all the money you've got. I'd just be writing the check now.
You would, right?
I'd be forcing it in your hand, and I'd lock the door and wouldn't let you actually.
But what was the catalyst? That's a very powerful statement. You must have had a moment where you were on your floor. People talk about the darkest moments when you cried, when you were angry. To go from, like, if, for want of a better term, Mr. Corporate, Mr. IBM, the fucking huge organization, to now this very chilled, measured mindfulness dude. I mean, that's a big change.
Yeah. Am I chilled, measured mindfulness dude? I don't know. I'm a work in progress. I'll always be a work in progress.
When's the last time you cried?
A couple of days ago.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
Why's that?
I've got a friend who's been pretty unwell. Good friend of mine.
Right.
He's in hospital.
Sorry to hear that, mate.
Yeah, thanks. My basketball coach died recently. So it's been a lot. I'm realizing my mortality. Obviously that happens naturally, I guess, the older you get.
Yeah. But
I'm really realizing it. I'm in the age group now where, friends are getting seriously ill.
Yeah.
Older people that I know are dying. So yeah, I've felt quite emotional in the past few weeks.
Okay.
And when I feel that, I try and let it out, because my instinct, I don't know about you, my instinct is to push it down.
Yeah.
Every fiber in my being says, you're meant to be this tough guy. Men are meant to be the last ones to cry. I've got all this conditioned stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I'm trying now, and it's hard, but I try to let it out. And sometimes I can't let it out. Sometimes I will go and watch things like, it may sound really stupid to people listening, but I will try and find something sad to watch so I can cry.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because if I almost feel a bit numb if I feel a strong emotion, and it may be triggering something that I haven't particularly dealt with in the past, maybe the death of my nan and granddad, or somebody I really loved that I didn't really deal with. And I feel this kind of numbness.
Yeah.
But it's quite an intense energy.
I get it.
And there's a sadness there.
Yeah.
And a combination of a few things help. Doing a very active sport will help. Just to physically burn, to move helps. But I also want to release this. I want to kind of, it's like,
how often do you get that numbness feeling?
Not that often. I mean, I had it when my basketball coach died recently. I think that triggered something in me, because he was really a father figure.
Okay.
My dad's still alive, thankfully.
Right.
Mum and dad are both, in their sort of late 70s. But it made me realize, that people don't live forever.
No.
And that's probably the hardest thing we go through. And I take a lot for granted.
Like what?
People being alive, people being there.
Yeah.
Me being alive, me being healthy, me being able to walk and run and breathe. And
why did you not want to say gratitude earlier, out of interest?
I didn't want to say it. I think I was trying to make the point that positive thinking and gratitude aren't the solution to everything. If somebody's sitting there with clinical depression and you said, can't you be grateful? Do you know how many people are starving to death in X country?
Yeah, you totally fuck
I mean,
off.
look at your lovely clothes, and have you got a roof over your head tonight?
Yeah, I know.
Be grateful for this. Come on, you're an able-bodied person.
Yeah.
That's not, somebody's not going to go, oh shit, I didn't realize that. Thank you.
All right.
I feel brilliant.
I'm going to skip away now.
Yeah, I can breathe now. Thanks for telling me that. Of course, you can't do that. You can't compare your way out of depression.
No.
But these things do have a very valid place, and they're a really strong tool, and they're a very good thing. They're just not everything, which some people would tell you.
What would you say to someone who said, hang on, mate, so you're telling me that next time I feel this numbness, this anxiety, I need to go and put on a sad film and cry my eyes out. What a load of nonsense. I'm going to go down a pub and have a pint, or I'm going to go for a run and exercise. You can't just, every time something happens, you can't just do that. What would you say to that?
I would never try and convince anyone to do anything. I stopped doing that years ago. So when I first started, when I discovered this thing called meditation, I don't like the word meditation, but when I discovered this thing that massively helped me, I had a bit of what I thought was an epiphany. I thought, my God, my head was flooded with, it's going to help this person, it's going to help that person, it's going to help my dad, it's going to help. And I went to people and I was like, can you just download this app? It's free for 10 days. Let me give you a code. I can get you. And I've read this book.
Rescuing people.
Yeah, absolutely. I love to rescue.
Yeah.
I love to rescue. I'm over empathic, probably to a point of.
And why is that? Maybe an obvious question. Why is that not necessarily the right thing to do, or for you, or for them? Do you think?
It's fucking draining for me. But I don't think it's the right. I don't think it's the right thing for others either. I think, and this is the skill I'm learning as a teacher, is to step back and allow people to learn this stuff for themselves and develop.
There's got to be a will, hasn't there, as well, for them to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I want, which is, back to your question, what would I say if someone said that? I wouldn't say go home and cry and find what makes you sad and get it out your system. And I would say, this is what's helped me.
Yeah. But the overarching thing of that is it is about processing it. Sometimes you have to process it.
Yeah, you got to.
That numbness that does resonate. Sometimes I get that. I don't know how often I get it. It's quite rare. And it's like, where the fuck has this come from?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes you don't necessarily need a reason for it. You just got to accept it's there. And I think it's just something you've got to. I think what you don't do is just try and bat it away, as you say. You've got to embrace it, I'd say. And that can be in whatever form you want to. I think. What do you think?
Absolutely, because we talk about talking therapies early. Psychoanalysis will probably go into that. Where's it come from, Chris? And let's look at your childhood and let's go back.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that's a great thing to do. But I think sometimes in some situations, an emotion comes through and you don't know where it's come from, and you can't pin it on anything. And if you can then work with that and accept that, that's very powerful. Because the mind wants to know the answer to everything, right? But in my experience, the greatest things are beyond comprehension by our minds.
Yeah. What's one of the worst or the worst decisions you've made in your life?
I don't know. I'm kind of in a place where when I look at my life, I almost think I can't regret things. Back to Eckhart Tolle, he would say that people can only act according to their level of consciousness at any given time.
Yes.
And if you're doing that, that's another one that winds people up, right? Because if you said, well, what about somebody that's abusing somebody? What's about somebody that murders somebody? We're just going to let these people off? Or they're just acting according to their level of consciousness? What a load of shit. We need to be punished. But if you look really deeply at that,
I agree with you.
If people can only act according to the level of consciousness, then what do we do?
Yeah.
How do we live with that? How do I live with that? How do you live with that? How does society live with that? Does that mean we should be regretting stuff? Does it mean we're making bad decisions? Does it mean we're just doing our best all the time? What does it mean?
I think otherwise you're constantly beating yourself up. If you look back, and I always say I'm a much better version of myself 2 years ago, but then actually the tools, knowledge, wisdom where I was in my life 2 years ago was probably the best I could do at that time.
Right.
And in any event, I can't fucking change it anyway.
Right.
And that's easy to say.
Yeah.
But I do think that we often only do the best that we can in the situation that we're in.
Right.
And the fact that you can't change it anyway is important to understand. And I think regret is such a, people say, I don't have any regrets, but they might say that outwardly, but inwardly you don't know what they're thinking about. I don't necessarily believe people when they say that, because I think we've got a tendency to analyze things too much, right?
Yeah.
What do you think to that?
Yeah, I think I analyze less now.
Right.
Actually, I think I spent 40 years overanalyzing. It didn't really get me very far.
No.
And I think sometimes the less I analyze, the better. Because otherwise it takes you down a load of dead ends.
Yeah.
I should have done this. I could have done this. Why didn't I do this? This is how my life's going to be from now.
Yeah.
And it's constantly dragging you outside of the only moment that ever is, which is this moment.
Mm-hmm. So what does piss you off? What does make you angry?
Cruelty to dogs. That would instantly, I'd instantly
yeah. What do you do? What do you do? What happens for you?
Do you know, it scares me actually. It would scare me because I don't have kids. We've got a dog.
Yeah.
I would protect her with my life.
Seriously, yeah.
I love this little thing so much.
Yeah.
We've got such a bond. We spend all day, every day with each other.
Mm-hmm.
It scares me, Chris. I probably wouldn't even want to say what would happen if I had to defend her to the hilt, because I'd probably do anything for her.
Have you ever had to kind of do that kind of stuff, like really react angrily, or have you ever had to has anything ever kind of like made you do something that is out of your comfort zone? Any examples of that?
I'm out of my comfort zone all the time, constantly. My comfort zone isn't sitting here chatting to you. My comfort zone isn't setting up a business. My comfort zone isn't standing up and teaching people. My comfort zone isn't being the center of attention.
Yeah.
I've been so far in these last 3 years since I set my business up, I've pretty much forgotten what comfort zone feels like.
I agree with you. I mean, I'm the host of this podcast, and I think we're both having the same thing. We're like that, Swan. I'm enjoying this conversation with you, but it's not an easy thing to do, right?
No.
And I think that, as we said before, we're not advocating being vulnerable on the daily, but I think it's really important sometimes just to say, I'm struggling today, guys, and putting that out there. But there are people that do that too much, I think. But
yeah,
I just think it's about understanding that we're all human beings. And
do you think it's harder for men? I know it's impossible because you've never lived as a woman.
It's a big question, isn't it? I think in different contexts it is, yes. Not in every context. And I think sometimes there's a misconception that men have the easier end of the deal and women have the harder end of the deal. I think that we are conditioned generally not to speak like this, not to show our emotions, not to show any vulnerability. And women generally, by the nature and biology of them, lead with their heart and their emotions. They talk more. So in that context, 100% I do, yeah.
And who would you go to if you're having a wobble, if you're having a tough time? Who would you speak to?
Well, I do a lot of it myself as a coach. So, and this is where I believe passionately that who coaches the coach who leads the leader. If you're a mindfulness coach or wellbeing coach yourself, you've got to have people around you. So it would be people like yourself. I've got people like you in my community, my network, that understand it. And I would come to someone like you because I've got a good understanding of what I think you are as a human being. You would listen to me, you'd understand, you wouldn't judge. So anyone that I would feel comfortable with, male or female, actually.
Yeah.
And because particularly on LinkedIn, because I've been that way anyway myself, I think I've attracted those people into my life. So thankfully, I think I've got quite a lot of people that I would be able to say, I'm struggling today, and they would literally just be there and not judge. And I think that's one thing I think people should remember, is that if you are this individual that is sort of taking the piss out of people like that, you might be that person yourself one day. So you need to be very careful. It's easy for people to say, isn't it? But so
yeah,
I'd say just like-minded people.
Yeah.
What about
I
you?
think so. Yeah, you get a sense of who you can really open up to and have a deep conversation with, and it tends to be the people that have been wounded, like you have, right?
Yeah.
Because there's empathy in that. There's an understanding. I can relate to you. You know, if the 20-year-old me was talking to you now,
different ballgame.
No connection at all. What's this guy on about?
Yeah.
What's he talking about?
Yeah.
Vulnerable. Just get over it. Go and have a drink tonight, Chris. Just get pissed. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what you need to do. But
so what gets you out of bed then? You kind of touched on it. You kind of touched on the fulfillment about the feedback you get from your clients. Would you say that's the main thing that kind of lights your fire?
Yeah, I can notice it. So on days when I'm teaching, if it's a good group, it has to be a good group.
Yeah.
I yearn to teach people that want to be there, that want to be taught. So I will refuse to teach groups where managers used to ring me up at IBM and say, can my team need you? My team need to come on your course. And I'd say, well, let me speak to them first.
Yeah.
It's like fitness. You don't just
of course. Yeah.
So, but people that genuinely, with whom this resonates and want to be there, that absolutely lights me up. I wake up in the morning, I'm excited to teach them because it's different every time.
Yeah.
I'm learning as much as they are in some ways. And it's nice. It's nice having a passion. I used to get that Sunday night feeling.
Yeah.
You know, you go to bed,
of course, the
like,
dread.
You
mean,
work the next day, school the next day.
Yeah,
I don't get that anymore.
Yeah, I can't see you ever going back to that way of life, right?
I don't think I'm employable anymore. And you hear a lot of people say that,
true.
but I don't think I could be.
Yeah. So, what is your ideal client? And if you was to summarize in a sentence or two what you actually deliver for them, so the audience are clear, what would that be?
So my ideal client, I'm I come from a corporate background, so I've worked mostly with corporates since. But what I offer is mindfulness-based stress reduction.
Yep.
And what the hell does that mean? That means that I take people, my ideal clients really would be somebody who would come on a 6 or 8 week journey with me. But normally before that, we'd start with something a lot more basic. So if you said to me, come into my company, I've got a company of 5, 10, 500,000, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I'd say to you, okay, Chris, the first thing we need to do here, see what appetite there is for this in your business.
Mm-hmm.
Let's have just a 1 hour session. I call it a mindfulness masterclass, a power hour, whatever you want. People come along and they throw rotten fruit, and I encourage that, and they bring their cynicism and they tell me that mindfulness is the biggest load of bullshit, or they haven't got time for it, or it's woo-woo or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And we talk about it. What is it? What isn't it? What does the science say? Why are the big companies like Google and IBM and Salesforce been using it for God knows how long now? We go through it. It's a really light-hearted thing. I don't have any slides. It's fun. It's just cool. A nice discussion like you and I are having now. At the end of that hour, there'll be a certain percentage of those people in that room that will say, I'm ready for this.
Yeah.
I'm ready for this.
Because you can take a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink. And I think that goes back to the point around we need to be guides or mentors. But if you're doing the do for them, it's never going to work, is it?
Ever.
No.
Not ever. So once we've filtered that list out of people that are saying, I'm ready, and they could be ready for loads of different reasons.
Yeah.
I'm sleeping badly. I'm anxious. I can't switch off after work. I'm irritable with the kids all the time. I'm not present with my wife. I'm not, I've forgotten what it's like to feel peaceful, and whatever brings them to it, fine.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've got a choice of where do we go with that. Now, the gold standard answer to go with that would be an 8-week course.
Yeah.
Very carefully put together, Oxford University, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
When I say 8 weeks, I'm only talking 90-minute sessions once a week for 8 weeks. It's not like an intensive thing.
Okay.
And we practice different ways of inviting more peace, being calmer, stilling our minds, quietening our minds. What happens when we do that? What does happen when our mind's quiet? Is that some of the greatest moments of your life? Is it? Why? And how do we quieten our minds? Can we quieten our minds? Can we quieten them through fighting it? Can we quieten them through drinking, booze? Well, yeah, we probably can, but is that a great long-term solution? Probably not.
Yeah, it's getting them to almost surrender, isn't it, a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Not easy to do. A very powerful thing to do. And that's where the growth happens, isn't it? When you're able to kind of like, have you ever experienced people becoming very emotional in that sort of state of all that presence?
Yeah, because one of the weeks we do is compassion.
Compassion for themselves as well.
Both. Yeah. So week 6 will be compassion, self-compassion.
Yeah.
And that can be very radical and very new. And people, a lot of people I meet, that's a little bit jarring stuff.
Too much almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've got to tread quite gently there.
Yeah. Cool.
And we'd normally work with, well, what about your compassion for somebody you love? Can you wish them well? Can it be as simple as that?
Yeah.
Can we sit for 5 minutes, quieten our minds, bring somebody to mind whom we love or loved? It can be your dog. It doesn't even need to be a person. Can you imagine them on the most beautiful day of their life? Can you imagine them radiantly happy? Would you like to give them that as a rhetorical question? Of course they would.
Yeah.
Let's just kind of send them some good wishes, so to speak. Let's just say a few words under our breath. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy, whatever it is. And what does that feel like to you?
I think the trick is, though, because the average corporate person or even the average business owner or business doesn't correlate that what we do outside of work, the content that we absorb, the personal development we do, the relationships we have, the people we hang around with, the work we do on ourselves has a direct correlation with the output of what we do inside of work. So we can do the operations, marketing, branding, all that kind of stuff. But unless you're doing these things outside of work and you're in tune with yourself, I think you can only go so far.
Totally. But we've got science to back this up now, haven't we?
Yeah.
We've got a shitload of science to back it up. We've got people like Deloitte saying that if you intervene, proactively, the ROI is 500%. You've got companies like Google have been doing this since 2008. I mean, if there was no ROI, if there was no real solid business value in this, the big boys would have dropped it a long time ago.
Yeah. Because there's too many people sort of working in the business, not on the business.
Right.
And that's the difference sometimes. Steve, it's been absolutely fascinating. We've kind of run out of time, but we probably should do a follow-up or 2 or 3. As expected, very insightful. Before we go, what's one thing you'd like to leave the audience with? A piece of advice or wisdom or anything really?
Wow. I guess the one bit of advice I'd say is if there's anything I've said in this today that's resonated with them to a point where they're just interested in learning a little bit more, download an app, buy a book, listen to a podcast, listen to a great teacher, look up.
Yes.
Doesn't need to be me, anybody, right? But just nurture that, follow that, because that could lead you down the most beautiful path. So don't believe your mind if it comes in and says, "Oh, you were interested in it, but it's not going to do anything for you," or you're the only person in the world who's not going to be able, my mind's never still, so I could never possibly meditate. So I would say just to nurture that, because for me, that's the greatest gift I've ever kind of found, and the greatest gift I've allowed others to develop is all started with just one person saying one thing and someone saying, "Wow, I'd like to know more about that."
But that personal development self-care thing is a self-respect thing. When you start doing that to yourself and you start growing, you start to reflect that in other people as well. And you start to, I think you start to get the abundance around the willingness to actually understand that there are people out there that can teach me things. There are courses or apps, or actually I can develop as a person, as opposed to sometimes I think we can think that we're too advanced to grow sometimes. What do you think?
We're never too advanced to grow. I'm going to be growing to the day I die. I mean, that's for sure. And I think that if you can find good people, that can help you, they only need to be one step ahead of you. But surround yourself with these people. If you're, that cliche about you're the product of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
It's true, though. Yeah,
it's absolutely true. And I try, and the older I get, the more I don't believe that. I don't believe things anymore. It's what's my direct experience. My direct experience has been that's the truth.
Yeah. Steve, absolute pleasure. Where can people find you? Is it just LinkedIn, or are you on other stuff as well?
LinkedIn or stevewaremindfulness.com.
Okay. Great to have you on, mate. Thanks for that.
Thanks for having me, man.